I'm Madeline, 38 years old, and I never thought I'd be living alone in this apartment, surrounded by framed photos of a family that doesn't exist anymore. The hardest part is walking past Tyler's old room every night. My 19-year-old son hasn't spoken to me in over a year. All because I stood silently while my ex-husband James kicked him out of our home. I called it discipline then. Tyler called it abandonment. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if stories about family forgiveness and finding your voice resonate with you. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio with traditional values deeply ingrained in me from childhood. My parents were loving but conventional, always stressing the importance of a stable family unit above all else. I carried those beliefs into adulthood, dreaming of having the perfect family one day. The kind you see in holiday cards and social media posts. The kind where everyone is smiling and problems are solved around the dinner table with understanding words and warm hugs. I met James during my sophomore year of college. He was charming, ambitious, and already had a clear vision for his future. I was immediately drawn to his confidence and drive. Our romance moved quickly. Within a year, we were inseparable. By the time I was 22, we were married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family who told us we were the perfect couple. When I turned 19, I gave birth to our son Tyler. Holding him in my arms for the first time was the most profound moment of my life. He had these bright, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. James was proud, but immediately started talking about the kind of man our son would grow up to be. Strong, disciplined, successful. James worked his way up in a financial consulting firm, eventually becoming a senior executive. His career flourished, and so did his authoritarian viewpoints. Success in his mind came from discipline and unwavering adherence to rules. These principles guided his approach to parenting as well. Looking back, I can see the early warning signs of James's controlling behavior. He had specific ideas about everything from how dinner should be prepared to how I should dress for his company events. But I brushed these concerns aside, telling myself that his attention to detail was just part of what made him successful. As Tyler grew, James expected nothing short of perfection from both of us. I remember Tyler bringing home an A- on a math test when he was 9. Instead of praise, James sat him down for an hour to review every mistake. I watched Tyler's little shoulders slump further with each critical comment. Tyler was a bright, creative child with a natural talent for music and art. He would spend hours drawing intricate pictures or making up songs on the second-hand keyboard my parents bought him for Christmas. But these pursuits were seen as distractions by James, who wanted Tyler to focus on practical subjects that would lead to a stable career. I found myself constantly mediating between father and son. When James implemented strict study schedules for Tyler, I would secretly allow him extra time to draw or play music when his father worked late. When Tyler failed to meet James's expectations, I would comfort him privately while publicly supporting my husband's decisions. My own career took a back seat to family needs. I worked part-time as an elementary school teacher, a job I loved but never pursued fully because James believed a mother's primary responsibility was to her family. I convinced myself that this sacrifice was worth it for the stability of our home. Our extended family dynamics only reinforced these patterns. James's parents praised his parenting style, often commenting on how well-behaved and respectful Tyler was in their presence. My own parents, though more nurturing in their approach, never directly challenged James's methods. They would occasionally express concern to me in private, but always ended with some variation of, "But every family is different," or, "James only wants what's best for Tyler." As Tyler grew older, small instances of independence became battlegrounds. When he was 12, he wanted to join the school band. James insisted on soccer instead, claiming team sports built stronger character. I watched my son reluctantly agree his passion for music once again sidelined. That night, I found him quietly plucking at his keyboard with headphones on, creating melodies no one would hear. I lived with a constant internal conflict. I wanted to protect my son and nurture his individuality, but I also desperately wanted to maintain family peace and my marriage. I told myself that family stability was the greatest gift I could give Tyler, even if it meant sometimes silencing my own concerns or watching him compromise his interests. What I didn't realize then was that every time I chose peace over protection, every time I stayed silent when James was too harsh, I was teaching Tyler a lesson I never intended. I was showing him that I would always choose the appearance of family harmony over his emotional needs. It would take losing him completely for me to understand the full weight of those silent choices. As Tyler entered his teenage years, the tensions in our household intensified. Like most teenagers, he began to question the rules and expectations that had governed his childhood. But unlike many parents who expect this phase and adapt, James viewed any challenge to his authority as a direct attack on the family structure he'd worked so hard to build. When Tyler was 14, he missed his curfew by 20 minutes after hanging out with friends at a school basketball game. I was worried but relieved when he texted to say he was on his way home. James, however, was furious. He waited by the door and immediately launched into a lecture about responsibility and respect. Tyler's explanation that his friend's mom was running late picking them up was dismissed as an excuse. His phone privileges were revoked for 2 weeks. I remember the look on Tyler's face that night. It wasn't anger or defiance. It was resignation. He'd learned that explanations didn't matter, that his perspective wasn't valued. I spoke to James later that night, suggesting the punishment was too severe. He accused me of undermining his authority. To keep the peace, I backed down. This pattern repeated throughout Tyler's high school years. He excelled academically, maintaining a near-perfect GPA despite his father's pressure, but socially, he struggled. He had a small circle of friends, but often declined invitations to parties or weekend activities, knowing the interrogation and potential restrictions that would follow weren't worth the brief freedom. Tyler's artistic talents continued to develop despite the limited encouragement. His art teacher called me one day to tell me he had extraordinary potential and should consider applying to art programs for college. I was proud but nervous about sharing this information with James. When I finally did, James dismissed it immediately. "Artists don't pay mortgages, Madeline," he said. "Tyler needs a practical degree. Business engineering or law. Something that guarantees stability." The most significant argument happened shortly after Tyler turned 16. He'd been researching colleges and mentioned his interest in pursuing music production or graphic design. James didn't just disagree. He laughed. Actually laughed at our son's aspirations before launching into a lecture about the real world and how creative fields were for people who weren't serious about success. I watched Tyler retreat into himself that night and later found him sitting silently in his room, staring at his college brochures. I sat beside him and tried to offer comfort. "Your father just wants security for you," I explained weakly. "Maybe you could minor in something creative while pursuing a more traditional degree." Tyler looked at me with disappointment. "Why can't you ever just take my side, Mom? Just once?" His words stung because I knew they were true. I was becoming increasingly aware of the damage being done to our family dynamics to Tyler's spirit, but I continued prioritizing what I thought was family stability. I didn't realize I was sacrificing my relationship with my son in the process. When Tyler was 17, he started dating Alicia, a passionate, outspoken girl from his AP literature class. She was creative like Tyler, with dyed purple hair, and dreams of becoming a filmmaker. James disapproved immediately, claiming she would be a bad influence, despite her excellent grades and polite demeanor during visits to our home. After one particularly tense family dinner, where James questioned Alicia about her parents' careers and her own college plans with obvious judgment, Tyler confronted him. "Why can't you just respect my choices?" Tyler asked, his voice tense but controlled. "Alicia is smart and kind. She makes me happy." "You're too young to know what will make you happy long term," James responded. And part of my job as your father is to help you make decisions that you'll thank me for later. Later that night, I found Tyler angrily throwing pebbles into the small pond in our backyard. You need to pick your battles with your father, I advised, sitting next to him on the garden bench. Maybe tone down Alicia's visits for a while until things calm down. Tyler looked at me with growing resentment. You're always on his side. Always. Even when you know he's wrong. I'm not on anyone's side, I insisted. I'm just trying to keep peace in the family. That's the problem, Mom, Tyler said, standing up to leave. Peace at any cost isn't really peace at all. It's just silence. And I'm getting really tired of the silence in this house. I started to notice how Tyler had begun to view me not as an ally, but as complicit in his father's controlling behavior. My attempts to counsel him privately about picking his battles only reinforced his perception that I would never truly stand up for him. My friend Catherine tried to warn me during one of our coffee dates. Her own son had left for college and rarely came home to visit. You need to be careful, Madeline, she said. Boys become men who remember how their mothers stood up for them, or didn't. I'm doing the best I can. I defended myself. Family harmony benefits everyone. Does it? She asked. Or just James? For Tyler's 18th birthday, I organized a small gathering with family and his closest friends. I had hoped the milestone would bring a fresh start for our family relationships. Instead, it ended in tension when Tyler announced over birthday cake that he was considering taking a gap year to intern at a local music studio before starting college. James's face darkened immediately. I knew what would follow. The argument didn't happen at the party, but later that night, loud enough that everyone in the house could hear every word. I stood outside Tyler's bedroom door, listening to James list all the ways Tyler was throwing away his potential, all the sacrifices we had made for his future. I should have walked in. I should have stopped it. Instead, I went to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and pretended I couldn't hear my son crying through the wall. The week before everything fell apart had been unusually tense in our household. Tyler was in his final months of high school, with graduation approaching quickly. He had been accepted to several colleges, but remained undecided, much to James's frustration. The deadline for decisions was looming, and James pressed the issue at every opportunity. Tyler had grown increasingly independent, staying out later with friends, responding to texts with shorter replies, and spending less time in common areas of the house. I recognized it as normal separation for a young adult preparing to leave home, but James saw it as defiance and disrespect. The evening that changed everything started like many others. It was a Friday in May, warm enough that the windows were open, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine through the house. James and I had finished dinner alone as Tyler had texted he was going to a concert with friends and would eat before coming home. He'd promised to be back by 11, which James had reluctantly agreed to. At 11:30, Tyler still wasn't home. James sat in the living room, ostensibly watching TV, but really watching the clock. I busied myself cleaning the already clean kitchen, trying to ease the tension I could feel building. At 11:45, we heard Tyler's car pull into the driveway. James muted the television, his posture stiffening as he prepared for confrontation. I dried my hands and moved toward the living room, hoping to diffuse what was coming. Tyler walked in, his face still bright from the evening's excitement. He smelled faintly of smoke, though I was certain he didn't smoke himself. Probably just from the venue. His smile faded immediately when he saw James waiting. "You're late," James stated flatly. "Sorry," Tyler said, setting his keys down. The band played an encore set, and then traffic was backed up on Main Street because of road work. "You could have texted," James said, standing up. "Your mother was worried." I hadn't been particularly worried, knowing Tyler was responsible, but I said nothing to correct this mischaracterization. "My phone died," Tyler explained, pulling it out as if for evidence. I'm really sorry if you were concerned. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you broke the rules. James continued, his voice rising. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I'm talking about. How are you going to handle college if you can't even respect simple curfews? Tyler's face flushed. Dad, I'm 18. Most of my friends don't even have curfews anymore. As long as you live under this roof, you'll follow our rules, James said, stepping closer to Tyler. And the constant disrespect stops now. I could see Tyler struggling to contain his frustration. He looked at me, hoping for support, but I averted my eyes, focusing on straightening a stack of magazines on the coffee table. This is ridiculous, Tyler finally said, his voice tight. You treat me like I'm 12, not 18. I've never given you any real reason not to trust me. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I have a 4.0 GPA, but nothing is ever good enough for you. Don't raise your voice at me, James warned. I'm not raising my voice, Tyler replied, his voice indeed rising now. I'm just asking to be treated like an adult. James pointed his finger directly in Tyler's face. This attitude is exactly why I'm concerned about your future. You think the real world is going to coddle you? You think your boss will accept the band played an encore as an excuse for being late? Tyler stepped back, his hands clenched at his sides. This isn't a job. This is my home. At least it's supposed to be. And in this home we have rules and expectations, James countered. The argument continued to escalate, with James listing all of Tyler's perceived failings and Tyler defending himself with increasing emotion. I stood frozen in place, my heart racing, wanting to step between them, but paralyzed by my own fear of confrontation. Then came the moment that changed everything. James made a comment about Tyler's impractical dreams and how he would end up a failure if he continued down this path. Tyler's face contorted with hurt and anger. You know what? You're not looking out for my future. You're just a controlling asshole who can't stand the idea that I might make different choices than you did. The silence that followed was deafening. In all his 18 years, Tyler had never spoken to his father that way. I gasped audibly, my hand flying to my mouth. James's face turned dark red. What did you just say to me? Tyler stood his ground, though I could see him trembling slightly. You heard me. Get out, James said, his voice dangerously quiet. What? Tyler asked, confusion momentarily replacing anger. I said, get out of my house, James repeated louder this time. If you can't respect me under my own roof, then you don't get to stay under it. Tyler looked stunned. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, James replied. Pack a bag and get out. When you're ready to apologize and show proper respect, we can discuss your return. This was the moment. This was when I should have stepped forward, should have said something, should have protected my child. But fear paralyzed me. Fear of James's anger turning toward me. Fear of the marriage falling apart. Fear of acknowledging that our perfect family was anything but. Tyler looked at me, his eyes pleading for intervention. Mom. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I stood there silent, complicit. The look in Tyler's eyes shifted from hope to understanding to profound betrayal. In that moment, I watched something break inside my son that I would never be able to repair. Fine, he said quietly, no longer looking at either of us. I'll go. He walked upstairs, and I followed him at a distance, watching as he pulled a duffel bag from his closet and began stuffing it with clothes, his laptop phone charger, and a framed photo of his grandparents. He intentionally left behind the family portrait that sat on his desk. As he zipped the bag closed, I finally found my voice. Tyler, where will you go? Maybe we should all calm down and talk in the morning. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment. "I always thought you'd choose me when it really mattered," he said softly. "Now I know you never will." He brushed past me and walked down the stairs. I heard the front door open and close, then the sound of his car starting and driving away. I stood in his doorway looking at the room that suddenly felt empty, even though all his possessions remained. Downstairs, James was pouring himself a drink in the kitchen. "He'll be back tomorrow with his tail between his legs," he said confidently. "Sometimes tough love is the only way to teach responsibility." I said nothing, just walked numbly to our bedroom and closed the door. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment when Tyler looked to me for help, and I failed him. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. No texts, no calls, just the crushing weight of what I had allowed to happen. The morning after Tyler left, an uncomfortable silence filled our house. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as James read the newspaper and ate his breakfast as if nothing unusual had happened. I pushed eggs around my plate, unable to eat, jumping each time my phone buzzed, only to find it was work emails or news alerts, not my son. "He'll be back," James said without looking up from his paper. "He has nowhere else to go." But Tyler didn't come back that day, or the next. By the third day, I was frantic, calling and texting repeatedly with no response. Each message I sent became more desperate. "Please let me know you're safe. We can work this out. At least tell me where you're staying." Finally, on the fourth day, I received a brief text. "I'm safe, don't worry." No indication of where he was or when he might return. Through mutual friends, I learned that Tyler was staying on his friend Marcus's family's couch. Marcus's parents had always liked Tyler, and apparently didn't ask too many questions when he showed up needing a place to stay. Without telling James, I transferred $500 to Tyler's bank account. A few hours later, I received another text. "You don't need to do that." But he didn't return the money, which told me he needed it more than he wanted to admit. When I suggested to James that perhaps we should reach out to Tyler and invite him to come home, his response was firm. "Not until he's ready to apologize for his disrespect." This is an important lesson about actions having consequences. As days turned into weeks, my worry transformed into a gnawing resentment toward James. I began to see clearly how his rigid expectations and controlling behavior had pushed our son away. Conversations between us became strained, limited to necessary household matters and superficial topics. The first major family event without Tyler was his grandmother's birthday dinner. James's mother asked about his absence, and James smoothly explained that Tyler had chosen to stay with friends while working through some attitude issues. The casual dismissal of our son's absence made my stomach turn. But it was during the Christmas holiday when my epiphany struck full force. We had always made a big production of Christmas morning with pancakes and presents and family traditions. That morning, I walked past Tyler's empty room. The door still closed, as if preserving the space for his return, and something broke inside me. Later, while James was in the shower, I found myself drawn to Tyler's room. I hadn't been inside since he left, maintaining some unspoken boundary. The room was exactly as he'd left it 7 months earlier, except for a fine layer of dust on the surfaces. I opened his desk drawer and found a stack of drawings from when he was younger. Pictures of our family holding hands. A drawing of me with the words "World's Best Mom" scrawled in childish handwriting. I sank to the floor, clutching those drawings to my chest, and finally allowed myself to sob. The perfect family I thought I was protecting had never really existed. And in trying to preserve an illusion, I had lost something real and precious. That evening, I initiated the first serious fight with James about his handling of Tyler. "It's been 7 months," I said as we cleaned up after our quiet Christmas dinner. "Enough is enough. We need to actively reach out to Tyler and tell him to come home, no conditions." That's not how parenting works, James replied dismissively. He needs to understand there are consequences for disrespect. This isn't about parenting anymore, I snapped. This is about your ego. Our son is out there somewhere instead of here with his family because you couldn't handle being called a name in the heat of an argument. James looked genuinely shocked at my outburst. In all our years together, I had never directly challenged him this way. He called me an asshole under my own roof, James said, his voice rising. What would you have had me do? Let that go. Show him that he can speak to people that way with no consequences. I would have had you act like a father instead of a dictator, I shot back. He was 18, James. 18-year-olds say things they don't mean when they're angry. You kicked our son out of his home over a single word said in anger. Through friends of friends, I discovered that Tyler had enrolled in community college and found a part-time job at a music store. He was moving forward with his life without us, without me. The realization was both heartbreaking and a strange source of pride. He was proving his resilience, his independence. Everything I should have helped him develop in a loving, supportive home environment, he was now learning the hard way on his own. I made one attempt to visit Tyler at his workplace, waiting until his shift ended and approaching him in the parking lot. The moment he saw me, his body language changed, becoming guarded and distant. What are you doing here, Mom? He asked, keys in hand, clearly eager to leave. I miss you, I said simply. I want to talk. There's nothing to talk about, he replied. I'm doing fine on my own. Tyler, please. I reached for his arm, but he stepped back. I'm sorry about what happened. Your father was wrong too. My father, Tyler interrupted. What about you, Mom? Where were you when he threw me out? What did you say? Nothing. You just stood there. His words cut through me like a knife because they were true. I had no defense. I made a mistake, I whispered. A terrible mistake. Yeah, you did, he agreed. And I'm paying for it, not you. You get to go home to the same house, the same life. I'm the one who had to start over. He got into his car and drove away. That night, I received a text from him. Please don't come to my work again. I need space. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I respected his wishes, though it felt like another piece of my heart breaking. My depression deepened, and I found myself going through the motions of life without really participating in it. Teaching became my sole joy, the hours spent with my students, the only time I felt purposeful. The final breaking point in my marriage came during a particularly heated argument about Tyler. James made a comment that he was better off without all the drama, and that Tyler would come crawling back eventually when real life gets tough. Something snapped inside me. No, he won't, I said with sudden clarity. He won't come back because you've shown him exactly what conditional love looks like, and he's chosen to remove himself from that equation. And honestly, I don't blame him. James stared at me stunned. Whose side are you on, Madeline? I should have been on Tyler's side from the beginning, I replied. And I'm on his side now, even if it's too late. That night, I moved my belongings to the guest bedroom. Our 19-year marriage had finally reached its breaking point. Moving to the guest bedroom was just the first step in a journey that would completely transform my life. James seemed genuinely shocked by my decision, as if he'd never considered that I might actually leave him. He vacillated between anger and attempts at reconciliation, neither of which swayed my growing determination to make changes. We tried marriage counseling mostly at my insistence. I hoped that perhaps with professional help, James might recognize his role in our family's breakdown. But the sessions only highlighted deeper issues in our relationship that had been present for years. During our third session, the counselor asked about the power dynamic in our marriage. James responded confidently, I make the major decisions because I'm the primary breadwinner. Madeline handles the household and day-to-day matters. And how does that arrangement feel to you, Madeline? The counselor asked. For the first time, I admitted aloud, suffocating. Like my opinions don't matter unless they align with what James already wants to do. James looked as if I'd slapped him. That's not fair. I've always provided for you and Tyler. I've given you a good life. A good life isn't just about financial security, I countered. It's about feeling valued and respected. When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of telling me what we were going to do? As the sessions continued, I began reconnecting with parts of myself that had been dormant for years. My own desires, my own voice. I remembered the ambitious young woman I'd been in college before I'd subsumed my identity into being James's wife and Tyler's mother. I also began to recognize other ways James had controlled me over the years. How he had subtly discouraged friendships he didn't approve of. How he had criticized my clothing choices when they didn't match his preferences. How he had dismissed my interest in advancing my teaching career as unnecessary since his income was sufficient. Needing perspective from someone who knew me before James, I reached out to my sister Lisa, who lived in Seattle. We hadn't been close in recent years, partly because James found her too opinionated and visits had become increasingly infrequent. Our phone call lasted 3 hours. I shared everything that had happened with Tyler, my separation from James, and my confusion about the future. Honestly, Maddie, I'm surprised it took this long, Lisa said. James has been controlling you for years, and you've been letting him because you thought that's what a good wife does. I thought I was creating stability, I defended weakly. Stability isn't the same as happiness, she countered. And it's definitely not worth losing your son over. That conversation was the clarity I needed. 2 days later, I told James I wanted a separation. His shock quickly turned to anger, then to desperate negotiation. He promised to change to contact Tyler himself to be different, but something had fundamentally shifted inside me. I couldn't unhear Tyler's words or unsee the truth about my marriage. I think we both know it's too late for that, I said gently. Telling our friends and family about the separation was difficult. Many expressed surprise having bought into the facade of our perfect family. Some took James's side, suggesting I was having a midlife crisis, or that I was ungrateful for all he had provided. Others, particularly some of my female friends, quietly expressed support, a few even admitting they had wondered how I had tolerated James's controlling behavior for so long. After 3 months of separation, with no improvement in our relationship, I filed for divorce, ending 19 years of marriage. The process was painful but necessary. Dividing our shared life into his and hers felt like performing surgery on our past. The house where we had raised Tyler went to James as I couldn't afford to buy him out and didn't want to stay there with all its complicated memories. Instead, I found a small 1-bedroom apartment closer to the elementary school where I taught. It was the first time I had lived alone in my adult life. The space was modest, but mine decorated with colors and styles that James would have vetoed as too feminine or impractical. The loneliness was crushing at first. At 38, I found myself starting over, figuring out who Madeline was when not defined by her roles as wife and mother. Evenings and weekends stretched empty before me, no longer filled with family obligations and social events connected to James's work. I made multiple attempts to contact Tyler about the divorce, thinking perhaps this significant change might open a door to reconciliation. My messages were brief and without expectation. Your father and I are divorcing. I've moved to an apartment near Oak Ridge. I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. His response when it finally came was equally brief. I'm sorry about your divorce. I hope you're okay. Not exactly a warm invitation to reconnect, but it was the first acknowledgement from him in months that wasn't purely practical, and I clung to it as a tiny seed of hope. My journey to financial independence was challenging. The divorce settlement provided some security, but I knew I needed to increase my income to support myself long term. I applied for full-time positions at several schools and secured an interview at Westlake Elementary. Preparing for that interview was terrifying. I hadn't interviewed for a job in over 15 years. Standing before my bathroom mirror in a newly purchased blouse, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. There were new lines around my eyes and mouth, streaks of gray in my hair I'd previously colored to please James, but also a determination in my gaze that had been absent for too long. I got the job. The principal later told me it was my passion for teaching that stood out, a quality that couldn't be faked or manufactured. For the first time in years, I had achieved something significant entirely on my own merit, and the confidence it gave me was transformative. Therapy became an essential part of my journey. My therapist, Dr. Kaminsky, helped me confront my enabler behavior and people-pleasing tendencies. During one particularly emotional session, she asked me to articulate what I had been most afraid of when Tyler looked to me for support the night James kicked him out. I was afraid of losing everything, I admitted through tears. My marriage, my home, my sense of security. But in trying to hold on to those things, I lost what mattered most. And what did you learn from that choice? She asked gently. That security without authenticity is a prison, not a home, and that I never want to betray someone I love like that again. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I hardly recognized my life. My one-bedroom apartment had gradually become a home decorated with plants and colorful throw pillows. My full-time teaching position at Westlake Elementary filled my days with purpose and joy. The financial strain was still present, but manageable, and the independence was worth every penny pinched. I had developed new friendships with several of my colleagues, women who accepted me for who I was now, not who I had been as James's wife. We met for happy hour on Fridays, attended local art events, and shared stories of our lives with refreshing honesty. These friendships felt different from the carefully curated social relationships of my married life. They were messier, more authentic, and infinitely more fulfilling. In therapy, I continued working through my people-pleasing tendencies and fear of confrontation. Dr. Kaminsky helped me understand how my own childhood had shaped these behaviors. My parents had valued peace and harmony above all, often at the expense of honest communication. I had internalized this, believing that maintaining a perfect family image was my primary responsibility, even when that image was a facade. Healthy relationships require boundaries, Dr. Kaminsky reminded me during one session. And enforcing boundaries sometimes means creating temporary discomfort. You've been avoiding discomfort your whole life, Madeline. I began keeping journals documenting my journey of self-forgiveness. The hardest person to forgive was myself, for all the times I had failed to protect Tyler, for the years I had diminished my own needs and desires for the authentic life I had postponed in pursuit of an illusion. Learning about boundaries and assertiveness felt like acquiring a new language in middle age. I practiced saying no to requests that didn't serve me, expressing preferences without apology, and standing my ground in minor disagreements with friends. Each small victory built my confidence for the larger challenges. I reconnected with old friends James had subtly discouraged over the years. My college roommate Sandra visited for a weekend, and we stayed up late drinking wine, and remembering who I had been before marriage had reshaped my identity. She brought old photos that made me laugh and cry, images of a younger, more carefree version of myself. "You know what's amazing?" Sandra said as we flipped through the album. "That girl is still in you. She's coming back." One Saturday, while browsing a local farmer's market, I ran into Emma Tyler's high school girlfriend. I almost didn't recognize her with her now blue hair and professional attire. "Mrs. Wilson," she said with surprise, then corrected herself. "Sorry, should I still call you that?" "Madeline is fine," I replied, feeling strange at the formality I'd once insisted upon. "It's wonderful to see you, Emma. How have you been?" Over coffee, she shared that she was now working at a local marketing firm while taking night classes in film production. Eventually, the conversation turned to Tyler. "Have you seen him recently?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She nodded. "We're not dating anymore, but we're still friends. He's doing really well in his music production classes at the community college, and he loves his job at Soundwave." "I'm glad," I said, feeling both happiness for his success and sadness at my absence from his life. Emma hesitated, then added, "He's different now, more confident, but also more guarded." "Guarded?" I repeated the word, stinging. "He doesn't talk about family much," she explained. "But I think he misses you. He keeps a photo of you in his wallet, an old one from when he was little." That small detail gave me more hope than anything had in months. I continued sending birthday and holiday messages, careful to keep them brief and without pressure. "Thinking of you today," or "Hope you're well. I'm here if you ever want to talk." On his 19th birthday, I sent a gift card to his favorite music store with a simple note: "Proud of all you're achieving. Love always, Mom." 2 days later, I received a text that both broke and mended my heart a little. "Thanks for remembering." As I settled into my new life, I began redecorating my apartment, removing the few reminders of my life with James that had followed me. I donated his mother's crystal vase that I'd never liked, but had displayed prominently for years. I replaced the neutral-colored bedding James had preferred with a vibrant teal comforter. Each change, however small, felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. I joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children, meeting bi-weekly in a church basement with others who understood my particular pain. The stories varied widely, from conflicts over lifestyle choices to religious differences to addiction issues, but the common thread was the same. We were all learning to live with a particular kind of grief, the mourning of a relationship that still existed in theory, but not in practice. "The hardest part," shared Donna, whose daughter hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, "is accepting that you can't force reconciliation. You can open the door, but they have to choose to walk through it." The wisdom I gained from others in similar situations helped me develop patience. I was learning to hold space for Tyler's eventual return without demanding it to respect his boundaries, while maintaining hope for healing. 6 months after my divorce, a colleague set me up on a blind date with her brother-in-law. David was kind and attentive, genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings in a way James rarely had been. But as we sat across from each other at dinner, I realized I wasn't ready. The vulnerability required for a new relationship felt overwhelming. "I think I need to focus on myself right now," I explained when he called for a second date, "and on rebuilding my relationship with my son." Instead of dating, I channeled my energy into activities that nourished me. I took an art class, something Tyler would have loved, and discovered I had a modest talent for watercolors. I painted landscapes mostly, but also created a portrait of Tyler from a recent photo Emma had shared with me. I didn't send it to him, but kept it on my bedside table as a reminder of what I was working toward. On weekends, I sometimes visited places from Tyler's childhood: the playground where he had first learned to swing by himself, the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated every report card, the community theater where he'd played the piano for a school talent show in 5th grade. At each location, I reflected on the joy we'd shared and the opportunities I'd missed to truly know my son, to champion his dreams instead of allowing them to be diminished. The woman I was becoming through this painful journey was someone I was finally beginning to respect. Someone who could look in the mirror and see not just James's wife or Tyler's mother, but Madeline, a person of value and substance in her own right. 1 year and 2 months after Tyler walked out of our home, I found myself attending a parent-teacher conference at Westlake Elementary. As the 3rd grade teacher, I sat across from parents discussing their children's progress strengths and areas for improvement. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could successfully guide other people's children while having failed my own so spectacularly. After the last conference of the evening, I was gathering my papers when Sharon Miller, mother of my student Jacob, lingered behind. She looked hesitant, as if debating whether to speak. "Is everything okay with Jacob?" I asked, concerned. "Oh yes," she assured me quickly. "Jacob loves your class. It's just, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I noticed you don't wear a wedding ring, and you seem to really understand my son in a way his previous teachers didn't." I smiled politely, unsure where this was going. Sharon continued, "I'm going through a divorce right now. It's been hard on Jacob. His father is very critical, especially about Jacob's reading difficulties. I find myself constantly torn between keeping peace with my ex and protecting my son from his harsh standards." Her words struck a chord so deep within me that I had to take a steadying breath before responding. "Can I share something personal with you, Sharon?" I asked. When she nodded, I continued. "I lost my relationship with my son because I chose peace over protection too many times. I stood by while his father's criticism crushed his spirit, and when it really mattered, I failed to stand up for him." Sharon's eyes filled with tears. "That's my greatest fear. Your son needs one person who is absolutely in his corner," I told her. "One person who will defend his worth and dignity no matter what. Be that person even when it's difficult, even when there's a cost." After Sharon left, I sat alone in my classroom thinking about the advice I'd given her. Advice I wished someone had given me years ago. Advice I needed to live by now, even if it was too late to change the past. That evening, I wrote a long letter to Tyler. Not a text or an email, but an actual handwritten letter on stationery I bought specifically for this purpose. I didn't make excuses or try to explain away my failures. Instead, I took full responsibility for every time I had failed to protect him, every time I had chosen James's approval over Tyler's well-being, every silent moment when words were desperately needed. "I was wrong," I wrote. "Not just the night you left, but for years before that. I failed you as a mother by not standing up for your right to be yourself, to pursue your own dreams, to be treated with dignity and respect in your own home. My silence was not neutrality. It was complicity, and you deserved better." I explained about the divorce, my therapy journey, and the painful lessons I had learned. I told him I was proud of the independence he'd shown in building a life for himself. I assured him that I expected nothing in return for this letter, that I understood if he wasn't ready or willing to reconnect. "I love you unconditionally," I concluded. "Not the son I imagined you should be, but the person you actually are. I'm here whenever or if ever you're ready. Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting." After sealing the envelope, I drove to the address Emma had reluctantly provided when I explained my purpose. It was an apartment building near the community college. I left the letter in his mailbox, not wanting to ambush him with my presence, then drove home with a mixture of dread and hope churning in my stomach. 2 weeks passed with no response. I tried not to check my phone obsessively, tried to continue with my daily routines, tried not to let disappointment crush the fragile new confidence I had built. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, as I was grading papers, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I had memorized, but that rarely contacted me. "Got your letter. Can we meet for coffee? Saturday beans and books at 2. My hands shook as I responded simply, "I'll be there. Thank you." I spent an embarrassing amount of time preparing for that meeting, changing outfits multiple times, rehearsing what I might say, arriving 30 minutes early, and then waiting in my car to avoid appearing too eager. By the time I walked into the coffee shop at exactly 2 o'clock, my nerves were stretched to breaking point. Tyler was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He looked different. His hair was longer, and he had a thin beard that made him appear older than his 19 years. He wore a black t-shirt with the logo of a band I didn't recognize, and a silver chain I'd never seen before. But his eyes were the same, those thoughtful eyes that had once looked at me with unconditional trust. "Hi, Mom," he said as I approached, standing briefly as I took the seat across from him. "Tyler?" I said, my voice catching slightly. "Thank you for meeting me." An awkward silence followed both of us, suddenly unsure how to navigate this reunion after so much time and hurt had passed between us. "I got you a latte," he finally said, pushing one of the cups toward me. "You still drink those, right?" The fact that he remembered such a small detail about me brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. "Yes, thank you." The initial conversation was stilted, focusing on safe topics. He told me about his music production classes at the community college, his part-time job at the music store, and the apartment he now shared with a classmate. I shared brief updates about my teaching position and new apartment, careful not to mention James or dwell too much on my divorce. Eventually, when the superficial topics were exhausted, I gathered my courage and addressed the elephant in the room. "Tyler, I meant every word in that letter. I failed you, and I'm so deeply sorry." He studied his coffee cup intensely. "I needed you to stand up for me, not just that night, but all the times before." "I know," I said softly. I was so focused on keeping peace that I couldn't see the damage being done. I thought family stability was the greatest gift I could give you. I was wrong. Tyler looked up, his expression a complex mixture of lingering hurt and cautious openness. "Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't even Dad kicking me out. It was watching you stand there saying nothing." "That moment haunts me every day," I admitted. "If I could go back and change one moment in my life, it would be that one. I would have told your father he was wrong. I would have gone with you if necessary. I was scared of losing everything, and instead I lost what mattered most." Tyler nodded, slowly absorbing my words. "I was really angry for a long time," he said. "At both of you, but especially at you, because I always thought you were on my side behind closed doors. Finding out you weren't it was like losing my safety net." "I understand why you cut ties," I said. "You had every right to protect yourself." "I'm doing okay now," he offered. "My roommate Marcus is cool. I'm making good grades. The store manager is talking about promoting me to shift supervisor." Pride swelled within me at his resilience. "I'm so glad, Tyler. You deserve good things." "Are you okay?" he asked, studying me with those perceptive eyes. After the divorce and everything, the genuine concern in his voice nearly undid me. "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. "It's been a process learning who I am outside of my marriage. But I'm happier now, even with all the challenges." We talked for nearly 2 hours, gradually moving from careful politeness to something approaching real connection. There were no dramatic tears or Hollywood-style reconciliation. Just two people who had once been the world to each other, tentatively finding their way back to some new version of family. As we prepared to leave, Tyler said, "I'm not ready for regular family dinners or anything. I need time." "I understand," I assured him. This was more than I dared hope for already. "Maybe we could do coffee again next month," he suggested. "No pressure, just checking in." "I'd like that very much," I said, restraining myself from reaching out to hug him, respecting the boundaries he was setting. We established a tentative routine of monthly coffee meetings. Slowly, conversation became easier, less laden with painful history, and more focused on our current lives. I learned about his new friends, his music projects, the bands he followed. He asked about my students and seemed genuinely interested in my stories from the classroom. 3 months into our cautious reconnection, Tyler mentioned he was dating someone new, a girl named Jenna who studied photography. The way his face lit up when he spoke about her made me smile. "She sounds wonderful," I said. "I'd love to meet her someday whenever you're comfortable with that." "Maybe," he said, not committing, but not refusing outright either. We're going to a photography exhibition next weekend. She has a piece in it. 2 weeks later, I ran into them at a local bakery. The introduction was brief and slightly awkward, but Jenna smiled warmly and thanked me for the congratulations I offered on her exhibition piece. It was a small moment, but significant in its normalcy. When Thanksgiving approached, I prepared myself for spending another holiday alone. I had plans to volunteer serving meals at a community center, determined to make the day meaningful despite my solitude. To my surprise, Tyler texted me 3 days before, "Jenna and I are having Thanksgiving at our place with some friends. Nothing fancy. You could come for dessert around 6 if you want." The invitation was casual limited, but it was an opening. I brought a homemade apple pie and stayed for 2 hours meeting Tyler's friends and seeing glimpses of his new life. He didn't introduce me as the mother who had failed him, just as my mom, Madeline. A simple introduction that carried the weight of forgiveness still in progress. Throughout this gradual reconciliation, I continued my therapy with Dr. Kaminsky, working through my complex emotions. She helped me understand the difference between unconditional love and enabling, between earning forgiveness and expecting it. True love respects boundaries, she reminded me, including Tyler's need to rebuild trust at his own pace. I came to accept that some damage cannot be undone. The relationship Tyler and I were building was not the same as the one we had lost. It was something new, hopefully healthier, defined by greater honesty and respect for each other's separate identities. I also accepted that Tyler's forgiveness was his choice, not my right. Each small step toward reconciliation was a gift, not an obligation he owed me. This understanding freed me from the desperate need for immediate resolution and allowed me to appreciate each moment of connection for what it was. The empty room in my apartment that I had initially designated as Tyler's whenever he's ready gradually transformed into a home office/guest room. I kept a few items that held special meaning, his childhood stuffed tiger and favorite books, but I no longer preserved it as a shrine to what was lost. Instead, it became a space that honored both our past connection and our current separate lives, with room for possible future visits. Sitting here now, looking back on the journey of the past year, I understand something I wish I had known sooner. Family isn't defined by who lives under the same roof, or by maintaining an illusion of harmony. Real family is created through respect, authenticity, and the courage to stand up for each other, even when it's difficult. Even when there's a price to pay. The road ahead with Tyler remains uncertain. Our relationship continues to evolve, sometimes taking steps forward, occasionally sliding backward when old wounds are accidentally reopened. But we are walking this path with greater honesty than before, and that gives me hope. If I could share one lesson from my experience, it would be this. There is no peace worth having at the expense of your integrity or at the cost of those you love. The appearance of harmony built on silence and submission is just another form of chaos, one that eventually destroys from within. The hardest and most important lesson I've learned is that love without courage isn't really love at all. It took losing my son to find my voice. I hope by sharing my story, someone else might find theirs before it's too late. What was a moment when you had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for what was right? How did that choice affect your relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more authentic conversations about family forgiveness and finding your voice. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to begin healing the relationships that matter most.